This is the Russian diplomatic compound. It was created to house Russian diplomats and their families, but many experts and locals believe there are spies behind those walls.
There are Russian spies disguised as diplomats at the Russian diplomatic compound.
That's where all the spies for Russia, they all hang out in there.
So I visited to learn more about the building, and I started by interviewing locals outside of the compound.
Yeah, so what do you know about that building?
It was put over here in the Bronx to keep it out of Manhattan. They didn't want it in Manhattan.
My mom always called it like the Russian mission. They were building it when she was younger, and so she remembers like getting built and everybody was like freaking out. And she always said that they built it from the top down.
Do you ever see people coming out of there?
Yes, I do. Several people in the morning and the evening.
Anything you notice about them or?
Yeah, they don't want to talk to nobody. You say hello, they ignore you.
The first things I noticed about the building was that it was surrounded by cameras and this long fence. It also had this strange design where it was more narrow at the bottom.
According to, folklore or whatever you would want to use, there is quite a bit of communications interception equipment in that building. Pretty much that's where all the spies for Russia, our friends in Russia, they all hang out in there. And several times the FBI has come here, where they've actually come here and arrested spies.
Arrested and charged Evgeny Barakov with conspiring to act as an agent of the Russian Federation on American soil. Mr. Barakov lived in Riverdale in close proximity to the Russian diplomatic compound.
That's about all I really know about it. I'm curious to know who does the elevators in there, though.
Yeah, right.
Because I've never met an elevator man that's worked in that building.
Yeah.
And I work here in the Bronx quite a bit, and I know most of the mechanics in the borough. And we've always made a joke about that building. Like, would the Russians got their own service guys? Maybe we can organize them into the union.
Yeah, convert them.
Yeah. That's about all I can really tell you about it. I'm sure that
yeah.
somebody that lives in the neighborhood would probably know a lot more and see a lot more.
Later in the day, we end up meeting a lady who's lived in the neighborhood her whole life and was actually friends with the residents of the compound.
Guy at the booth right there, being out cleaning the sidewalks and all, we started talking. He got AK-47 right there in that office.
Really?
Showed me that, though. I know they got weapons in there. Yeah, well, if war break out, I tell you, I wouldn't want to be around here. Okay, because I think they might have tanks in the ground and so.
I think they are closed off by virtue of having a big fence around them and not having people come in.
Yeah.
It's not a part of the community in that we neighbors do not go there, but we welcome everyone who lives there to be a part of our institutions. Anytime you have a community behind a closed fence and no one is allowed in, it's a complicated possession check.
The compound is so shredded in secrecy that not even the fire department could gain access when a fire broke out more than a decade ago.
That being said, we embrace our neighbors, they go to our schools, they play in our parks.
Has anything changed since that whole conflict in Ukraine?
No, not that. They used to protest here with the Ukraine thing, and then I guess police broke that up. Now and then you see them come with the flags and stuff, but really nothing popped off when that happened.
After scouring the internet, I was able to find a video of the building being made. The way they did it was that they built each story at the ground level, then lifted them up.
And even while the floor moves upward into place, work on the next begins.
The rumor surrounding this construction method is that they used it to stop American intelligence agents from getting a foothold in the building. Another rumor is that they chose its location because it's one of the highest points in the Bronx, which would allow for better surveillance. But these are just rumors, so we tried getting inside to learn more.
We're recording a research project, and I was wondering if it was possible for me and my camera woman to get a tour. No photos? Gotcha.
After the expected rejection, I was left wondering what the contents of the building were. Was it really the hotbed of spies that many made it out to be?
Diplomatic missions often serve as a Trojan horse for foreign espionage.
Russian intelligence services are perhaps the most active and aggressive here in U.S. soil, and in no place more so than in the city of New York.
Most people we interviewed knew very little about the building.
So do you know anything about the building over there? Nope. Oh, you don't?
You've ever heard anything about it?
Yo.
But as we're close to calling it a day, we end up meeting the most knowledgeable person yet.
I grew up in Riverdale, so years ago, when it was the Soviet Union, the people who lived here obviously didn't have much contact with everybody in the neighborhood. But then after 1991, after the fall of the Iron Curtain and the Berlin Wall and all of that, the people who lived here then became a little bit more integrated into the community. Inside these gates was considered the Soviet Union before. At the time, there were like diplomats who lived here and probably Soviet spies. Around 1984, maybe 85, somebody threw like a Molotov cocktails in here. So for many years, right here, where that black Honda Accord is parked, was a police booth like that, just like that, but it was an NYPD police booth, and they were always set in that booth a New York City police officer on either side of the mission. But then they just put this up again, I guess, a couple of years ago with the whole Ukraine thing. That's a new booth. Yeah. And so all the diplomats, they have like diplomatic immunity, they can park wherever they want.
Near the Russian mission to the United Nations, we spotted 1, 2, 3 diplomatic vehicles parked on the sidewalks.
And that's really what I know about it. I know my parents lived here and they had a few houses in Riverdale. They ended up renting to different diplomats and maybe spies, I don't know, who worked for the Soviet Union, and ended up becoming very good friends with some of them they're really nice, great people. I remember Olga and my mom becoming good friends. As tensions started to kind of wane between the US and the USSR, I remember sitting at my mom's kitchen table and her saying, when I came to America in like 1981, I had to walk around a grocery store because I couldn't believe how much food that you had here. She was like, I had never seen anything like it, because she had been living in Russia her whole life. Like when I was a teenager, then a couple of the guys would come and like hang out with us. Like they started to become friends with the girls in the neighborhood. It was fun. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
And we would always name them by their first name, and we could never pronounce their last name. Like I remember one guy was Mark the Russian, and then there was Jerry the Russian. So we would always call them by their first name, the Russian, because their last names were so hard to pronounce, and we were kids and we had an exposure. You know, it wasn't the same kind of world it is now. Yeah. Like, you know, it's very common to hear names like that now, but when I was a kid, it wasn't, you know. Yeah. And it was also, when we were kids, on the other side, that was the FBI house. So the FBI used to live in, so when we were teenagers, we were always like, the FBI house. So that was where, I mean, and I think it's so funny that they think they have these like covert operations, which obviously there's lots of secret stuff and what we don't know about, but it's like the 16-year-olds in the neighborhood knew that the FBI was in there. Like we knew that was the FBI house, you know, like we all knew it, you know.
Wow.
So I don't know. So we still called it the FBI house. I don't know if it's still there. I think it's still there actually. It was like a wood frame house. Anyway, so that's all I know.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's such a cool story.
After doing further research, I found that in 1986, the FBI identified 25% of the Soviet diplomats working at the Secretariat building in NYC as spies. Some of those diplomats almost certainly lived in the Russian diplomatic compound. And in 2022, 12 Russian diplomats were expelled for engaging in espionage activity. With everything I've seen, I think it's more than likely that the Russian diplomatic compound contains spies. To learn more about New York City's secrets, consider subscribing.